That which has been in the news. We certainly have heard it recently, and in the not-too-distant past, incidences of fatal crashes involving young drivers where it appears nothing more than speed, or at least excessive speed, was the main factor in that crash, including the one that we heard about in Wisconsin from that star MSU football player who was killed in that crash. And so we got to thinking, how can we talk about this and try and illustrate some options for safer driving out there? Sergeant Todd Elliott is with us now from the Battle Creek Police Department to talk to us a bit about that. Good morning, Sergeant.
Good morning, Rich. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming today. We appreciate that. Boy, these stories, we've had a little spate of them recently, but these are not new. These happen. Young people finally get an opportunity to get behind the wheel, and maybe we get a little carried away.
Absolutely. Driving is a huge privilege, and I emphasize privilege.
Yeah.
And it's not a right like a lot of kids think it is, and it's something that has to be taken very seriously.
So there are ways and nuggets of information that a parent could impart upon a young driver, I would imagine, that might help it sink in that if you're going to go fast, there could be problems with that.
Certainly. And like with a lot of teen and young child behavior, even into late teens and early 20s, a lot of it starts with the parents and modeling that behavior. Mm-hmm. As you probably know, we can speak to kids until we're blue in the face and tell them not to do something, not to do something. And if they see us doing it, they're going to probably think that it's okay to do it. So it starts with modeling the behavior you want your young teen driver to exhibit when they're driving. And a lot of these things can be very easy to slip into, especially if you've got friends in the car egging you on, or that car next to you egging you on, wanting you to race or just drive fast. It's a very slippery slope to get into. So a lot of it really starts with the parents at home and instilling these good behaviors early on. I mean, if you look at it, kids start driving legally when they're 14 years and 10 months old.
Wow.
And that's young. That's very, very young. These kids are very immature, and they lack that decision-making ability and the recognition of dangerous situations. And one of those is speed. Kids want to drive fast. They think it's fun. They get in the car. They push the accelerator. It's very easy. And before they know it, especially in a lot of these new cars, they're up 60, 70 miles an hour.
Boy, I think we all can attest to how we've been driving and look down and realize we're going faster than we thought we were. Cars just respond a lot differently than they did 30 years ago.
Certainly, and they drive a lot smoother. So what felt like 50 miles an hour, when I started driving quite a few years ago, certainly feels differently now.
Yeah. We'll talk more about that, too. And of course, the way we get licenses now is different than when you and I were in driver's training. It's graduated now. We'll talk about, start with that 14 years and 10 months, but you don't get it instantly. So maybe that's a help, too. We'll discuss all of this, and also an opportunity for parents to, through the Michigan State Police, enroll their young drivers in a safe driving program. We'll talk about that coming up in just a few minutes. WBCK, we're here with Sergeant Todd Elliott of the Battle Creek Police talking about driving safety, particularly for young people. Sometimes we just don't know how fast we're going, right? I mean, it might not sound fast to be going 50 or 60, but there are ways that you can impart how fast that really is.
Certainly. It's something that we teach our officers also and kind of put a different spin on it, where if you're traveling a speed, people think of that as miles per hour. And that's a rather large scale to use. So if you're traveling 50 miles per hour, I like to throw that into a feet per second analogy.
Oh, yeah.
And if you take your mile per hour speed and multiply it times about 1.5, 1.47 is the actual calculation there, that gives you your feet per second. So at 50 miles an hour, you're traveling 75 feet per second. So for every second, you're going 75 feet down the road. And if you look at the average reaction time, it's about 3 seconds. And that's for your brain to process something and then tell your body to react to it. So at 75 feet per second going down the road, a hazard comes out in front of you, an obstacle, whatever it may be, you've now traveled 225 feet before your foot is even on the brake.
Mm-hmm.
So you're almost going a football field distance before your foot is even on the brake. And with a young driver, their reaction time is going to be even longer.
That's amazing. So 75 feet a second at 50 miles an hour is your rate of travel. 3 seconds to respond to something that might require it. And so it all adds up to not a lot of time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then when you put it on the highway, you're traveling maybe 80 miles an hour down the road. And as you increase your speed, you may only increase your speed 5 miles an hour, but your feet per second increases exponentially, meaning it goes up a lot more than a 1-to-1 ratio.
Boy, it sure seems like you get out on 94 and there are a number of drivers who think nothing of 80 miles an hour or more.
Correct.
Just zooming right by you. Yeah, it was a few weeks ago, probably a month or so ago, there was a raccoon in the road on my way in, and it's completely dark. And I saw him, but like you say, there was very little time to react. It didn't help that he turned around and ran back in front of the car, and there was nothing I could do at that point. But even when I saw him, he was going out of the lane, and my thought was, keep running, buddy, because there's not much you can do, even when you have reaction time.
Right. And that's something good, like you touched on with the Michigan State Police teen driving program, is they teach ways to maneuver your car, because it's faster to drive around an obstacle than it is to stop before hitting it. And if you can be taught techniques to be able to avoid an obstacle in the roadway without just locking your brakes up or jamming on your brakes, it's a lot more effective. And that's what we teach our officers also, is controlled braking, where you're applying the brake and you're steering around an obstacle. And it kind of goes back to something with driving anyway, which is divided attention. You're doing multiple things at the same time. You can't just be doing one thing when you're driving. You're watching your speed. You're watching what your car is doing. You're watching for stop signs, for traffic lights. You're watching for other cars coming at you. So your mind has to be focused on many different things all at the same time when you're driving. And that kind of leads me to the distracted driving aspect, where you throw in anything. It could be eating a hamburger in a car, or drinking a pop, taking your eyes off the road for a couple seconds to adjust your radio station, or texting and driving on the phone. And these all add to the hazards in driving. And like I said, if you take your eyes off the road for 3 seconds at 50 miles an hour, that's 225 feet you just traveled, and you're not even looking at the road.
And that's at 50.
And that's at 50, yes.
I've seen more than once, going along a freeway, somebody go past me in the left lane with the phone against the steering wheel and their eyes down looking at that phone. And they're barreling in the left lane. Scary.
It really is. And it's something that's very difficult to do. And my wife and I have had to make it a very conscious decision that if I'm driving, she basically holds on to my phone. So if I get a text or a phone call, she answers it. Yeah. And yes, it is very hard to do. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm perfect at it.
You want to know what that chime is about on that phone.
Exactly. But I've got an almost 13-year-old son, and I need to set the good example for him.
And there's an interesting point. We'll talk more about this Michigan State Police driving course that you can take, actually. And we'll talk about that in just a minute and how you go about doing that and what's involved in it, coming up in just a second. WBCK, we're here with Sergeant Todd Elliott for a few more minutes, Battle Creek Police Department. We started out talking about the notion that young people need to clue in a little bit more to the dangers of driving when they're not clued in and focused. This program that you referred to, Michigan State Police, is actually called a Teenage Defensive Driving Program. It's for young drivers, right?
Yes, it is. And the requirements on it are pretty simple. You've got to be 16 years old and add a graduated Level 2 license or higher. Okay. And, yeah, that's what is that, Level 2. So what age is Level 2? If we start at 14 and 10 months, where are we? Somewhere around 15? You're going to be right around 16. Right around 16, okay. So that's pretty close to the point at which somebody takes your picture and hands you the license and off you go. That's it, yes. Yeah. So what can you expect in this course? Well, this course, and I've never taken it myself, but I have taken a 3-week course at Michigan State Police Driving School, which are taught by the same instructors, and that's for police driving instruction. And the quality of instructors at Michigan State Police is world class. That program there trains officers literally from around the world. Their instructors are very, very good at what they do. And this program, it's an 8-hour course, so a one-day course. 7 hours of that is actually hands-on on the drive track.
Wow.
And you get about an hour of classroom instruction. And you have a 3-to-1 student-to-instructor ratio, which is great. It's a lot of one-on-one time. And these guys show you a lot of what can really happen and how to react to it and how to respond to it.
Boy, they must have nerves of steel.
They do. It's pretty impressive to see these guys go around the track.
I mean, you can imagine as a parent, some of us just trying to teach our kids to drive is nerve-wracking, but imagine these fellas and ladies do this on a regular basis and in an instructor kind of way.
Yes.
And 7 of those 8 hours, you're in the car learning how to handle the car. I presume the core point there is to teach people how to handle a vehicle.
Yes.
In ways that maybe they didn't already know.
Correct.
What's an example of one of the things they might learn?
Well, the serpentine course is kind of a good example. And the serpentine is where you have a row of cones and you drive around them, kind of like a slalom course.
Okay.
And you go side to side through it. It's a fun course to drive. But what it teaches you is your relationship between your vehicle and a fixed object in the roadway. It teaches you where to look. You always want to be looking down the road, down the course of where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
And really, the faster you're going, the further down the road you want to be looking. So with the serpentine course, you're not looking at the cone that you're driving around, because if you do, chances are you're going to hit it. You want to be looking at the open space between the cones in front of you. So you want to look where you want your car to go. And the serpentine is a good example of that. And I mean, they talk about hand positioning and accelerator control, brake control, and how to keep your car moving smoothly while driving around an obstacle.
My mother always said, get the big picture.
Yes,
supposed to
exactly.
be looking way down. It's really easy not to do that.
It certainly is. It's real easy to look at that right off your bumper.
Yeah.
And in city driving, you want to be looking about a block down the road.
Oh,
or further. If you're on Columbia Avenue, 40 miles an hour, you want to be looking a few blocks down the road to see what traffic is doing, to see if there's a crash up ahead or any other type of obstacle or hazard.
Start preparing early for
Exactly.
that. So they're in this teenage driving program, they're actually in vehicles, not necessarily theirs, or are they driving their own?
They have civilian cars up there, so you're not driving a police car.
Got it.
But they have regular cars up there that the kids have a chance to get in and drive around.
Okay, so 7 of those 8 hours behind the wheel. Controlled braking, evasive maneuvering, and confined area maneuvering, that sort of thing. They're going to learn all of this stuff.
Yes.
So there's a cost associated with this?
$150.
Okay.
So it's a fairly minimal cost. And I can't say for sure, but it'd be worth asking your insurance company if you get a little bit of a break on your rates if you put your teen driver through this.
Well, and we'd be looking for those at
Absolutely.
that age, wouldn't we? Wow. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll put a link up to this on WBCKFM.com. But if you were to type into a search engine, Teenage Defensive Driving Program, that should come up, Michigan State Police, and you'll see this information and follow through and be able to register for that. How often do they do these?
It depends on the demand for it
Okay.
and what their availability is. If they're running recruit schools up there, they may not have as many in a year, but it really depends on availability.
Okay. So really, a 3-to-1 student-instructor ratio. That's pretty good.
Yes.
You're going to get a lot of focused attention with that.
Definitely.
All right, so if we walk away with anything out of this, we as parents or role models of young drivers, we can affect the way people handle their driving skills and learning more than maybe we think we do. And just remember that 50 miles an hour is 75 feet a second. And imagine what that's like. We appreciate the update. Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you, Rich.
Sergeant Todd Elliott, Battle Creek Police Department.